This monument once held a stone with the key to a lost Berber language that united warring tribes. A text so valuable that Britain stole it and destroyed the monument in the process. But this tomb only existed because of the decisions that Rome made while building over the remains of a powerful Numidian Berber kingdom that nearly conquered all of North Africa. How did Rome break its own rules here in building this hilltop metropolis? This is Dougga. After a decade away from excavating in Iraq and Lebanon, I came to Tunisia to explore the remains of what happens when Rome meets the Near East.
This is the Roman theater in Dougga, Tunisia, and this is the best preserved Roman city in North Africa.
But it's only so well preserved because the Romans took what came before, the Numidian town, and used its rubble to build this new center. Numidia was a kingdom formed from the Berber tribes of North Africa. They were split between two tribes, each with loyalty to Rome or Carthage, until the end of the Second Punic War. After switching allegiances, King Massinissa of the Eastern Massili tribe allied with Rome during their defeat of Hannibal and Carthage in 202 BC, securing the entirety of Numidian lands and the protection of their newfound Roman allies. By 158 BC, Massinissa had captured nearly all of North Africa, that is, except for a small rum state of Carthage, held in check by Roman treaties. Under Massinissa, Numidia developed and grew in power. He was able to wrangle the complicated tribal dynamics and succession into a stable single kingdom. The nomadic Berbers settled. They adopted agriculture. They took up Greek and Roman art, architecture, and iconography. And they continued to take Carthaginian territory until Rome completed its conquest and annihilation of Carthage in 146 BC. Decades later, the last Numidian king backed the wrong side in the Roman Civil War, and Julius Caesar simply annexed the entire kingdom, including Dougga.
This city was built on a hilltop, on a plateau, with a steep side that would have been great for fortifications. This is also what makes the city so interesting. Most Roman cities were flat, and they could be built on a plan, on a grid. But Dougga was different. Dougga was built on the old Numidian settlement. So instead, it is one of the most unique Roman plans across the entire Roman Empire.
The hilltop meant they couldn't renovate into the typical grid, and the thriving city meant they couldn't just start over. At the core of every Roman city was a forum directly in front of a Capitolium, the religious temple center in direct alignment with the civic plaza. But Dougga's steep slopes forced them to push the forum off to the side, breaking the sacred axis of Roman planning. But the specific placement of the forum in the Capitolium was not random.
The excavations found Numidian Berber, their agora.
The Romans placed their city center where the Numidians already had theirs, putting up symbols of Roman power, like the Temple of Jupiter, in this renovation. But the city itself got more than just a physical refresh. By the time Rome arrived, Dougga had already been shaped by 3 different empires and cultures. Originally a Punic settlement from Carthage, it had been captured by the Numidians around 150 BC. For a century, it sat right on the border between the Numidian kingdom and the Roman territory, absorbing influences from all sides. While Numidian officials conducted business in Punic, the language of trade and diplomacy, the new Berber population still spoke their ancestral Libyco-Berber tongue. It was the language that would appear on the stolen inscription alongside a Punic text. But even the gods of the city had been transformed once before during this Numidian occupation. The Numidians worshipped Tanit, but she wasn't originally a Berber goddess. She was Punic, adopted from their former Carthaginian rulers. My guide at Dougga explains the many layers of temple reuse here.
Under those stones, we got a maqdis. It came from the Phoenician traditions, temple used by the Berbers.
But Rome didn't destroy the earlier religion. It transformed it and brought it into its pantheon. Closer to the outskirts of the city, away from the forum, they built a temple to Juno Callistis, the evolution and the embodiment of the Punic Tanit, accepted into the Roman pantheon.
So this is the Temple of Callistis. Where I'm at right now was the Roman style podium. This was a blending of the two styles. This is an interesting example of they took an existing religion, the religion that the Numidians had, and then the Romans built their own temple, Callistis.
But not every part of the city was transformed. Down the hill, in the cemetery, they left the graves alone, including one particularly notable tomb.
So this is the Numidian mausoleum, and it's really the only Numidian architecture left at the site. It's interesting that the Romans left it when they changed the city. We are also kind of on the outskirts of the city now, much further down. So you often would have cemeteries or burials in the outskirts of cities. To the local Numidian population, keeping this was, of course, a respect for their ancestors.
But Rome's transformation wasn't the full story of this necropolis. It was just the first step in a pattern. Every conquering force that came to Dougga would follow Rome's playbook, tear down some of what came before, use the materials, and adapted to the needs of their time.
One of the stories of Dougga is of continuous reconstruction and new occupation.
After the decline of the Roman Empire and the Vandal invasion, the Byzantines reconquered this region, but Dougga's core would no longer be a civic center.
So we have the Roman square here, but we also have this wall that surrounds the Temple of Jupiter. This wall was part of the Byzantine fort that reused some of the stones from the Temple of Mercury. And one of the cool things about when these reconstructions happen is you can see the inscriptions, such as this inscription indicating it's from the Temple of Mercury.
A lot of what we see on the top of the site today is from this Byzantine fortress. But ironically, the only reason this Roman city was turned into a fortress, unlike so many others, was because the Numidians built it on a hill. And they needed that fortress, in part, because of the rise of Islam and the Arab invasion. In 700 AD, the Arabs conquered Tunisia and kicked out the Byzantines. They again would tear down and reuse the materials of what came before to adapt it to their needs. We can still see some of the evidence of that today.
And you also have this mosque that was built on top of the Roman site, the Byzantine site, that was kept even when the local population was moved out in modern times.
But during this era, Dougga fell from its heights to just a small town on top of a hill, nestled between the forgotten remains of lost empires. For nearly 1,000 years, Dougga slept as a small hilltop village. But when European Orientalists, diplomats, and explorers began traveling in North Africa, they found a mysterious language inscribed on stones and buildings across the region, a script we now call Libico Berber. To those Europeans, these signs meant nothing. They had no key, no clues to translate and understand the alphabet and the language it represented. That was until 1842, when the British consul, the representative to the Bey of Tunis, Sir Thomas Reed, spotted something extraordinary on this monument.
One of the things that's interesting about the mausoleum is that a lot of it was destroyed by the British consul to Tunisia. On the outside was an inscription in both Punic and Libyan writing, and he wanted to use that to translate it, much like the Rosetta Stone. But he was so indelicate in the process, he did a lot of destruction.
This bilingual inscription, the same text in both Punic and Libico Berber, this was North Africa's Rosetta Stone. Reed didn't even try to take careful tracings. Instead, he directed his workers to chisel it out by all means necessary, collapsing the monument in the process.
Today, that inscription is in the British Museum, because of course it is.
Despite its messy, unethical, and dubious acquisition, in London, German scholar Wilhelm Gesenius got to work on translating the text. The reason a bilingual text like the Rosetta Stone is useful is because you can match up known words, like names, to start to understand letters and sounds. Fortunately, the inscription from Dougga had Punic, a Semitic language that came from the Levant related to Hebrew. And because there are many bilingual Punic Latin texts, Gesenius was able to decode the alphabet of Libico Berber. It turned out the mausoleum belonged to a man named Adaban, a previously unknown leader. Perhaps he was a ruler of Dougga. Perhaps his memorial survived while others fell just because of dumb luck. Whoever he was, the code was now cracked. In 1900, with Tunisia now under French control, French archaeologists came to Dougga. Not only did they take the pieces of the Numidian monument and piece them back together, doing their best to reimagine what Reed had destroyed, they uncovered a new inscription in excavations underneath the Temple of Jupiter. With the new knowledge of the Numidian language, they could now decipher this text. On it was a dedication that read, "The people of Dougga built this temple for Massinissa the king," but the ancient Numidian past was not the last use of this alphabet. In the 4th century, the legendary Berber queen Tin Hinan had led her people into exile, going from what used to be Numidian lands into the vast sands of the Sahara Desert. With them, they brought a language, an alphabet, the Libico Berber script of the Tuareg tribes that today roam the vast sands of the world's largest desert.
If you're interested in learning more about Dougga, putting together a trip, you can check out Marikiva Travel, and we'll be coming here as part of our journey. So go to marikivatravel.com. There's a link in the description to learn more.